Health experts are raising alarms over the nutritional content of Nestlé's products, following an internal report that revealed a majority of its food and drink items fall short of recognized health standards.
It has now filed a criminal case against Nestlé India.
Environmental activists have also slammed Nestlé for its role in contributing to global plastic pollution.
The cocoa used by candy giant Mars is harvested by impoverished children in Africa.
These Ghanaian children are harvesting the cocoa that ends up in America's best-loved chocolates like M&M's and Snickers.
In the world's poorest countries, about 1 in 4 children are forced into child labor. Nestlé, the world's largest food corporation, collects millions of gallons of water annually from springs in Southern California. But with water scarcity affecting many regions, would you agree that their product shouldn't come from places where water is scarce or impure? Nestlé has been accused of exploiting resources that belong to no one, using indentured laborers in Asia and child slaves in parts of Africa. The company has also faced allegations of water mismanagement from Brazil to Flint, Michigan. When it comes to companies disregarding human health and safety, Nestlé seems to stand out. With over 2,000 brands, Nestlé sells everything from chocolate and cereal to coffee, baby food, bottled water, and ice cream. It's almost impossible to shop without encountering a Nestlé product. Yet the company is entangled in numerous scandals, ranging from child labor and exploiting the poor to claiming that water isn't a basic human right. How can a corporation with such a dark history continue to operate on this scale? In this video, we'll take a closer look behind the scenes of one of the most controversial companies in history. But to understand how Nestlé became what it is today, we need to go back to where it all began, with the story of one man. The journey of Nestlé starts in 1814 in Frankfurt, Germany, with the birth of a boy named Henry Nestlé, the 11th of 14 children born into a family of glassmakers. For generations, his family had passed down the trade of glass cutting and fitting. But young Henry had other ideas. Fascinated by chemistry, Henry chose to pursue a career as a pharmacist, defying his father's expectations. At just 15, he became a pharmacy apprentice and eventually left Germany for Switzerland, where he worked on medicines and chemical experiments. It was in Switzerland that Henry laid the foundation for one of the world's largest corporations. Today, Vevey, Switzerland, remains Nestlé's global headquarters. However, Henry didn't find immediate success. Before Nestlé became a household name, Henry dabbled in various businesses, selling liqueurs, vinegar, rum, lemonade, and even fertilizers. But none of these ventures flourished. His breakthrough came much later, in his 50s, when he discovered a pressing issue: high infant mortality rates caused by mothers being unable to breastfeed or children being allergic to cow's milk. Henry recognized both the tragedy and opportunity in this crisis. Determined to develop a life-saving solution, he began researching breast milk alternatives and conducting experiments with various ingredients. But it wasn't just scientific ambition that drove him. Henry's wife had struggled with health issues and couldn't have children. As a way to channel her maternal instincts, she encouraged Henry to create a substitute for breast milk that could save lives. Finally, in 1867, Henry developed one of the earliest baby formulas, a blend of cow's milk, flour, and sugar, offering a lifeline to infants who couldn't be breastfed. This innovation marked the beginning of Nestlé. Henry launched the company to market his formula, which started with noble intentions. A man determined to save the lives of infants in need. However, this isn't a feel-good story of triumph. It's more of a cautionary tale. What began as a life-saving venture would later evolve into something far darker. Nestlé's baby food would become the center of a global scandal, and as the company grew into a sprawling conglomerate, it found itself mired in controversy. And unfortunately, this was just the beginning. At first, Henry's baby formula was an overwhelming success. Orders flooded in so quickly that he had to open a factory just to meet the soaring demand. It all felt surreal. Everything was moving at lightning speed, and money was flowing in from every direction. Riding the wave of success, Henry partnered with a Swiss chocolatier in 1875 to introduce a new product, the world's first chocolate milk. In just a few short years, Henry went from being a relatively unknown farm assistant in Switzerland to one of the wealthiest men in the country, with Nestlé growing rapidly every month. However, the rapid success took its toll on Henry, who was entering the later years of his life and longing for more time with his wife. Feeling it was time to slow down and enjoy his remaining years, Henry decided to retire and sell the company. This transition marked a turning point for Nestlé, one that would shape its future in unimaginable ways. The new owners of Nestlé had grand ambitions to expand the business. In 1905, they merged with a rival company called Anglo-Swiss, which also sold dairy products. By joining forces rather than competing, the newly formed Nestlé Group could dominate the market more effectively and diversify its product lines. During the 1920s, the company rolled out new chocolates and beverages, and by 1938, they introduced the first mass-produced instant coffee. Their timing couldn't have been better. Instant coffee became essential during World War II, helping soldiers stay alert and even becoming a staple in emergency rations for U.S. troops. Alongside launching new products, the Nestlé Group also acquired any company they saw as either promising or a potential threat. Over the years, their portfolio of brands and products expanded rapidly, as did their wealth and power. But for Nestlé, growing profits was never enough. Behind the scenes, a more sinister plan was taking shape, one that would generate millions of dollars but at the cost of risking countless lives. When Henry first developed his baby formula in 1867, his intention was simple: to offer a life-saving supplement for mothers who couldn't breastfeed. He never aimed to replace breast milk entirely. After all, scientific studies have long shown that natural breast milk is healthier than any formula. Organizations like the World Health Organization, WHO, the American Medical Association, and UNICEF all recommend breastfeeding whenever possible. For many years, baby formula was marketed only as an alternative for those who genuinely needed it. However, by the 1970s, a century after the company's founding, sales growth began to stagnate, and Nestlé's leadership grew greedy. They wondered, what if we could sell baby formula to all mothers, not just those who needed it? Despite the launch of countless other products, baby formula remained one of Nestlé's most profitable items, thanks to its high margins. So they devised a plan. If they could convince more mothers to abandon breastfeeding in favor of formula, their profits would skyrocket. This marked the beginning of a campaign designed to undermine trust in breast milk. Nestlé's aggressive marketing of its baby formula during the 1970s serves as a sobering example of how corporate greed can have devastating consequences. The company promoted its formula as not just an alternative to breast milk, but a superior substitute, manipulating mothers into believing that using formula was essential for their baby's health. However, scientific evidence at the time already proved the opposite. Breast milk contained vital nutrients that fortified babies against diseases and infections, nutrients that formula could not replicate. Despite knowing this, Nestlé prioritized profits over health, and their tactics would go on to affect millions, particularly in developing countries. To ensure the success of its campaign, Nestlé paid doctors and hospitals to recommend their formula, misleading mothers into thinking it was medically necessary. This endorsement from healthcare professionals gave the impression that the product was safer and more beneficial than breastfeeding. However, in many cases, babies became more vulnerable to illness and malnutrition because they were deprived of breast milk's unique protective properties. Nestlé's marketing machine soon escalated, expanding aggressively into regions such as Africa and Asia, where they saw a new market ripe for exploitation. In these developing regions, Nestlé hired saleswomen, instructing them to pose as nurses to deceive mothers into switching to formula. Wearing uniforms that mimicked medical staff, these saleswomen infiltrated hospitals and maternity wards, preying on new mothers at a time when they were most vulnerable. Some even visited mothers at home unannounced, using high-pressure sales tactics to convince them to stop breastfeeding and start using Nestlé's baby formula. These sales agents worked on commission, meaning the more formula they sold, the more money they made. This incentivized them to push the product aggressively, regardless of the consequences for infant health. To entice mothers further, Nestlé distributed free samples of baby formula. On the surface, these free samples seemed like a generous gesture, but the strategy was far more sinister. Mothers were given just enough formula to last a few weeks, long enough for their natural milk supply to dry up. Once the free supply ran out, these mothers had no choice but to continue buying the expensive formula, now essential to their baby's survival. Nestlé had effectively created dependence, forcing families, often with limited financial means, to keep purchasing the product. The consequences of Nestlé's actions were particularly catastrophic in developing nations, where many mothers lacked access to the clean water necessary to safely prepare formula. Since the powdered formula had to be mixed with water, families often used whatever water was available, even if it was contaminated. This led to severe health problems, as infants who relied on the formula were exposed to waterborne diseases. Worse, many mothers, struggling to afford the formula, began diluting it to make it last longer. This further reduced the already limited nutrients in the product, leading to widespread malnutrition and weakened immune systems among babies. The problem was compounded by a lack of education and language barriers. In many cases, the instructions on how to properly use the formula were written in English, a language most mothers in these regions could not understand. As a result, many women did not realize that they needed to boil the water before mixing it with the formula to kill harmful bacteria. The combination of contaminated water, formula dilution, and poor sanitation turned what should have been a nutritional supplement into a source of sickness and death. Despite the mounting evidence of harm, Nestlé continued its practices without significant intervention. For years, the company seemed to escape accountability. However, in 1974, a report titled "The Baby Killer" exposed the dangerous impact of Nestlé's marketing strategy. The report accused Nestlé of creating an artificial need for formula, convincing mothers they couldn't properly care for their children without it, and profiting from this dependency at the cost of infant lives. When the report was translated into German with the blunt title "Nestlé Kills Babies," it sparked global outrage. Nestlé initially responded with legal action, trying to silence the accusations. But the damage had already been done. The scandal sparked international boycotts and protests as people around the world condemned the company's unethical practices. In many countries, activists and consumer groups demanded stricter regulations on the marketing of baby formula. Nestlé, which had profited massively from its aggressive marketing, now found itself at the center of a public relations nightmare. The Nestlé baby formula scandal remains one of the most infamous examples of corporate irresponsibility. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing profit over human well-being and highlights the importance of ethical business practices. To this day, Nestlé faces criticism for its role in the crisis, and the incident has become a rallying point for activists advocating for responsible marketing, particularly in vulnerable communities. Despite the growing scrutiny and outrage surrounding its marketing practices, Nestlé remained largely silent on the impact of its baby formula in the late 1970s. However, the pressure mounted significantly in 1978 when executives were summoned before the U.S. Senate. They faced tough questioning about the detrimental effects of their formula on infants worldwide, especially those who were sick or dying. This public spotlight led to the World Health Organization introducing new regulations aimed at curbing the misleading comparisons between breast milk and formula in advertisements. These regulations provided some relief in well-regulated countries, particularly in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. However, enforcement was inconsistent, allowing Nestlé to exploit loopholes and double down on its marketing efforts in underdeveloped nations where regulations were lax. As a result, their sales continued to soar in these regions, despite the mounting evidence of harm. Back in the U.S., as sales began to stagnate due to the negative press, Nestlé attempted to rehabilitate its tarnished image. They introduced a bizarre advertising campaign featuring super babies, intended to promote the idea that their formula was essential for a child's development. This marketing strategy was an attempt to shift public perception, presenting the company as having undergone a significant change, while they continued to use the same exploitative tactics in regions where they could operate without accountability. The hypocrisy of this strategy was glaring, especially given the ongoing health crises stemming from their aggressive marketing. In 2018, a report by Save the Children underscored that millions of vulnerable children remained at risk due to the relentless marketing strategies employed by Nestlé and other large corporations. The findings confirmed that, despite the serious problems caused by their past tactics, Nestlé was still deeply entrenched in unethical practices. The dark legacy of their actions had not faded. In fact, it appeared to be only the beginning of a troubling narrative. In 2005, the then CEO of Nestlé made headlines for suggesting that access to water was not a basic human right, a statement that sparked outrage worldwide. While he later retracted his comments under media pressure, this incident exposed a concerning attitude within the company regarding basic human needs. The implications of this mindset were further illustrated by Nestlé's actions in Pakistan in 2013. The company diverted clean drinking water from local villages, bottling it in their factories and selling it back to the same communities at exorbitant prices. This practice forced many residents to resort to drinking contaminated sludge water because they could not afford Nestlé's bottled water, which was originally sourced from their own land. Nestlé's strategy appeared to be a calculated move to deprive communities of a fundamental necessity, subsequently providing an expensive alternative. Local claims indicated that the company had depleted water resources so severely that water levels had dropped by hundreds of feet. The ramifications of such actions were dire, particularly for the impoverished populations that relied on accessible clean water. This exploitation was not limited to developing countries. In the United States, during severe droughts in California, many companies chose to relocate their operations to preserve water resources. However, Nestlé continued its operations unabated, extracting an astonishing 705 million gallons of fresh water from California's national parks. Their relentless pumping drained critical water resources, raising serious ethical concerns. When confronted about these actions, the CEO of Nestlé Waters infamously stated that if he could extract more of California's water for profit during the drought, he would do so without hesitation. Nestlé's pattern of behavior, aggressively marketing infant formula in vulnerable populations, exploiting water resources, and prioritizing profit over human rights, paints a troubling picture of a corporation that continues to operate without a moral compass. While the company has made efforts to rebrand itself and improve its image, the underlying issues remain unresolved, and their history of exploitation continues to reverberate through communities around the globe. As public awareness grows and more people become educated about Nestlé's practices, it is vital to hold corporations accountable for their actions, particularly when they directly endanger human lives and well-being. The case of Nestlé serves as a stark reminder of the consequences that can arise when profit is placed above ethical considerations. Advocates for corporate responsibility must remain vigilant, ensuring that companies cannot escape scrutiny and continue harmful practices under the guise of business as usual. The fight for justice and accountability is ongoing, and it is crucial for consumers to remain informed and engaged in demanding better practices from corporations that wield significant power over essential human resources. In Michigan, reports revealed that Nestlé was extracting an astonishing 747 liters of fresh water every minute from state reserves, paying a mere $200 for the privilege of taking 130 million gallons of Michigan's water. This alarming extraction led to a drastic decline in the state's water levels, prompting a judge to ultimately order Nestlé to cease operations due to the ecological damage they were inflicting. Despite the significant backlash, Nestlé remains the largest bottled water operation globally, owning over 50 brands. Their business model appears to incentivize targeting areas with limited clean water, as acquiring natural water supplies creates artificial shortages that boost demand. This strategy can be likened to the dystopian scenario in Mad Max Fury Road, where a character hoards water to control access and create desperation among the populace. Nestlé's tactics are similarly exploitative, drawing inspiration from the classic British show Only Fools and Horses, where characters hilariously sell tap water as spring water. Nestlé has, in practice, bottled municipal water and marketed it as coming from pristine mountain springs. This deceptive practice allows them to inflate prices dramatically. For example, a tank of this water may cost around $10 to procure, yet they can fill thousands of plastic bottles and sell it for an estimated $50,000, profiting handsomely from this glorified tap water. The parallels between fictional exploitation and Nestlé's real-world practices highlight a troubling trend in corporate behavior. As they continue to prioritize profit over ethical considerations, the consequences for local communities and ecosystems are severe. Transitioning from the water crisis to another grave issue, the dark reality of Nestlé's chocolate production comes to light. For many consumers, the thought of how their chocolate bar is made rarely crosses their minds. However, the brutal truth is that Nestlé has been implicated in using forced labor and even child slavery on cocoa farms. For years, this exploitative labor went largely unnoticed, enabling the company to maintain low costs and high profits. In 2000, a pivotal report surfaced accusing Nestlé of purchasing blood chocolates, revealing that the company was aware of the presence of enslaved children working on cocoa plantations. This was not an isolated issue. Other major chocolate manufacturers, including Cadbury and Mars, were also implicated. In response to the growing outcry, Nestlé and its competitors pledged to eliminate child slavery from their chocolate supply chains by 2005. However, the commitment to making their chocolate slave-free was not fully realized, raising serious questions about the integrity of their promises and the ongoing exploitation within their supply chains. These issues reflect a broader systemic problem within the food industry, where the pursuit of profit often comes at the expense of ethical standards and human rights. Nestlé's history of exploitative practices in both the water and cocoa sectors underscores the urgent need for accountability and reform. As consumers become increasingly aware of these issues, it is essential to push for transparency and responsible sourcing practices in all areas of food production. The fight for ethical practices in the corporate world is far from over, and it requires concerted effort from consumers, activists, and policymakers alike to ensure that companies like Nestlé are held accountable for their actions. In conclusion, whether through the depletion of vital water resources or the perpetuation of child labor in cocoa production, Nestlé's operations raise critical ethical questions that demand attention. Consumers have the power to influence change by making informed choices about the products they support and advocating for companies that prioritize human rights and sustainability. The ongoing battle against exploitation in all its forms is essential for creating a more equitable and just world, free from the practices of companies that prioritize profits over people. Years rolled by, and Nestlé continued to miss the deadlines they had set regarding ethical labor practices. In 2005, the International Labor Rights Fund, ILRF, filed a lawsuit against Nestlé and other chocolate manufacturers on behalf of 3 Malian children. These children were trafficked to the Ivory Coast, forced into slavery, and subjected to frequent beatings on cocoa plantations. Nestlé's consistent response to these horrific incidents was to claim it was impossible to monitor all the activities on these plantations while vowing to improve conditions. Yet, as the years passed, little seemed to change. In 2010, the documentary The Dark Side of Chocolate highlighted the media's attention to the plight of children being stolen from their homes and forced to work on plantations for meager wages or none at all. A 2020 investigation revealed that children as young as 8 were laboring on the farms of one of Nestlé's suppliers, working 7 days a week and carrying sacks weighing twice their own weight, earning around just $1 per hour. Once again, Nestlé denied knowledge of these conditions, reiterating their commitment to address the issue. While this is a complex problem that extends beyond Nestlé, it's evident that the company has been aware of these labor abuses for decades. With billions in revenue, they could have implemented more substantial changes if they truly wanted to. Their responses to brutal working conditions often seem reactive, primarily occurring when negative press arises. A glaring example of Nestlé's troubling priorities emerged in 2002 when they demanded $6 million from the Ethiopian government, one of the poorest nations on the planet. This dispute dated back to the 1970s, when a military regime nationalized foreign companies' assets. Years later, after acquiring one of those companies, Nestlé sought compensation for the seized assets. While technically within their rights to claim compensation, this demand came amidst a devastating famine in Ethiopia, threatening the lives of 15 million people. At that time, many citizens lived on less than $100 a year, making $6 million a potentially life-saving sum for the struggling population. Despite making $65 billion in sales that year, Nestlé initially refused to relent, emphasizing that it was a matter of principle. However, when media coverage increased and public outrage led to calls for a boycott, they quickly reversed their stance, settling the debt for $1.5 million and promising to reinvest it into the Ethiopian economy. Nestlé's pattern of prioritizing profits and public perception over ethical practices extended beyond this incident. In 2012, the Competition Bureau raided Nestlé's offices to investigate price-fixing allegations, claiming that they colluded with other chocolate companies to maintain artificially high prices. Although Nestlé denied any wrongdoing, they eventually settled for a $9 million agreement the following year. While this might be a significant controversy in isolation, it pales compared to the numerous allegations the company has faced over the years. Nestlé's troubling history doesn't end there. Other scandals include legal disputes over dog food produced by Nestlé Purina PetCare, which allegedly caused serious illness and death in thousands of dogs. The company has also faced criticism for its poor pollution record. Despite the growing list of controversies, many consumers find it challenging to boycott Nestlé products due to the vast range of items they offer. With a presence in almost every country and various product categories, from food and water to cosmetics, consumers often unknowingly support Nestlé's brands. Despite these challenges, Nestlé has continued to grow and acquire new companies, becoming increasingly powerful. While it's likely that many individuals within the organization strive to produce ethical products, the company's founding legacy, a genuine effort to solve public health issues, has become overshadowed by a profit-driven model that often creates problems for the sake of selling solutions. As we reflect on the complex legacy of Nestlé, it's crucial to recognize the impact of corporate actions on communities and the environment. While the company has made strides in some areas, the controversies surrounding its practices serve as a reminder that profit should never come at the expense of ethics. It's up to us as consumers to hold companies accountable for their choices. If you found this discussion insightful, please give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Together, let's demand better from the brands we support.